Thawra, they call out. In Arabic, the word means revolution. People in Lebanon have been protesting for weeks. Christina, a 21-year-old student, is on the front line in the capital, Beirut.
My priority right now is doing this and being here. I mean, at the end of the day, what is the point of going and studying in classes if I can't have a job in my country?
It's early morning in the mountains on the outskirts of Beirut. This is where Christina, who studies media at a private university, lives with her parents. The family is well-to-do, but they're worried because living conditions are getting worse in Lebanon for the middle classes too. There are few prospects for young people.
Know someone who's coming to Lebanon. How is our country going to thrive if everybody keeps leaving? But also, how are we going to stay here if there's nothing for us to stay for?
For me, revolution is yes, getting together, putting pressure on the government, try to change everything. But for me, I don't like it when they block roads and when they burn tires and when they burn anything.
When roadblocks were erected, Christina and her brother were caught in them. It brought back memories of the Civil War. She was just a young girl when whole districts were separated from one another.
She started crying and hugged us because, I mean, you can't not, I guess when you've lived the things they've lived, you can't not have this fear of civil war breaking out again because, I mean, it's not something pleasant. So, yeah, and you can see it in, I mean, my mom is a little bit... Sure.
Nothing. Yeah, I always say when I was their age and even younger, I was much tougher. But when I became a mother, I'm now... that's the phobia of the Civil War. And even though I was never afraid, but I think it's there, you know.
You just don't want to have to live it again.
Yeah, of course. I don't want you to live it. Not me. I don't want you to live it.
There weren't many women actually that night.
But like,
despite her mother's fears, Christina will not stop protesting.
People started getting...
Today's demonstration is set to be big. She's going with her friend Jana, whom she knows from university. They had a similar childhood, living with their families in the Gulf states for a long time because the situation was so insecure in Lebanon. This is quite typical. There are thought to be about 14 million Lebanese people living abroad and only about 6 million in Lebanon itself.
Before now, I actually really wanted to leave. Like, I saw myself continuing my life abroad. There's like this newfound love for Lebanon, and I think in the past few weeks I've grown more attached to it than I ever have been.
There is chaos, but this time it's caused by the protesters. They have chosen to demonstrate on the national holiday to show the government how much support they have. The middle classes are rising up against politicians who have failed to keep the state from going bankrupt.
The frustration has been bubbling for decades, but if I'm not mistaken, it was because of all of the unnecessary taxing that started happening. So they started taxing things like cigarettes.
The protesters are also angry about widespread corruption. This entire district in central Beirut was developed at the behest of the former prime minister, who profited massively at the cost of local business owners.
All of this is closed off. These aren't even like taken.
Most of the population could never afford to live here. It's dead capital for the owners. As things stand now, there are more cats than people.
There were people who lived here, who had stores here before all of this happened, and they would either force them out of their homes, pay them a small fee, and everything that happened here just cost, or they're like renting out for God knows how much higher the price. So it's absolute corruption. It's not fair.
The main reproach the protesters have against Lebanon's ruling class is corruption. They say politicians have led the country to bankruptcy. The state has massive debts, with interest rates consuming half of government revenue. The infrastructure has suffered all over the country. There's no reliable water or electricity supply. The financial crisis is very noticeable in stores, where prices have shot up.
Okay. So
Coffee used to cost 2,000 Lebanese pounds. Now it's 2,500. And this cheese used to cost 2,000. Now it's 2,750.
Prices started going up weeks ago and continue to rise.
If you earn $500 or $600 a week, how can you afford this? What I used to spend a month is now not enough to cover a week.
I recently heard that we're running out of grain, which is massive, and if we keep running out of these things and we don't have the money to import them, of course it's terrifying. It's very scary because there are going to be families and people who can't get food.
This is another reason why she and the other protesters refuse to give up. Today, they're meeting opposite Beit Beirut, a cultural center and museum about the 15-year-long Civil War, which killed 150,000 people between 1975 and 1990. Today's protests are about unity, bringing together all the 18 officially recognized religious groups in Lebanon. The protesters are walking along the former line of demarcation, the Green Line, which once divided East and West Beirut, separating mostly Christian and mostly Muslim neighborhoods. Get out, they sing. Get out, you are all corrupt. And then they continue on to Martyrs Square, which existed well before the Civil War and commemorates martyrs executed there under the Ottomans. It's in the heart of the capital. Now, former activists and people affected by the Civil War are also commemorated here.
She's so cute.
So this is my grandmother and her two friends, and she believes in change too, basically. Although she's 82, I think, now. She did live through the Civil War as well, and although she had sectarian belonging, I think she just gave up on it. And she sees me and her daughter, we're all, fed up with the system, so she gets influenced by that.
These sectarian divisions are what contributed to the Civil War and the aftermath, and the Taif Agreement obviously played a big role, but for us it's more about breaking this ridiculous wall down.
Jana is a Druze with Palestinian roots. Christina is a Christian with Assyrian, Palestinian, and Italian roots. But they both consider themselves simply Lebanese. As does Christina's boyfriend, Omar, who is a Sunni Muslim. This has logistical implications more than anything else.
It's not an issue for either of us, but sometimes parents are a bit more conservative and they're hesitant. So what happens is when two people from different religions want to get married, they have to change their religion on paper and they have to swear by their religion. And a lot of people do it very informally and they just do it for the technicality so that they can get married legally.
But it's really frowned upon by the rest of the family usually when someone wants to convert. So
yeah, like why are you going to convert? Why don't they convert for you?
If mixed couples have children, they automatically take on the father's religion. In this case, any children would be Muslim, like Omar. Generally, Christina's Christian parents accept him.
I think they like him.
No, they love him. They love him, but my mom will sometimes say, Christina, I love Omar. If only he weren't Muslim, if only. And I'm like, خلاص, just accept him for the person he is, or don't.
This would not be an issue at all if civil marriage existed in Lebanon and women generally had more rights. But according to the World Economic Forum's Gender Gap Report, Lebanon ranks 140 out of 149.
We kind of fetishize the idea of a woman as a mother, but we don't really go beyond that and see that she's an individual and a human, and she can achieve just as much as a man.
So the women here are also fighting for their rights and using a particular strategy. If the situation gets dicey, they go out onto the front line in a calculated move to contain the violence. They hope to keep the peace by standing between the police and male demonstrators, an effective yet stressful tactic.
I was crying and screaming at them to stop and telling them enough is enough. All the fights that I've seen have happened between men. And they always happen over some silly misunderstanding that escalates. So what we are trying to do is just kind of calm everyone down.
Overall, the protests have been peaceful, and the idea is for them to continue in the same spirit. Christina and her fellow demonstrators know that there can only be real change if they show they are determined.
It's gonna last until we get what we want, which is gonna take time. And I think it's important for people to realize that it's gonna take time. But I think it's also important for the people in power to realize that we will not stop until we get what we want. If it drags until Christmas, then until Christmas, here I will be.